Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Sunday, but that doesn't really matter. This is going to be the making of Elimination. Eliminate? Whatever. This is part one. This is going to be arrangement and elements. And what this is going to be is I'm going to basically play through each individual section and kind of identify what bit is happening where and why, and then how the whole track is arranged. And then that will be basically this whole video. And then part number two will be mixing and mastering. We'll focus primarily on drum mixing and how I did all the other individual things, and also the main mastering, which for this track is a little ridiculous. And then the last part will be sound design. We'll talk about how I made all the individual sounds. So this track is a bit ludicrous. This was my first attempt. I mean, actually, I think it's my only attempt at a drum step track. My understanding of what drum step is that it's basically dubstep at drum and bass speeds. So 174 or 175 for people who do that, but I do 174 because I'm classic like that. So my understanding of the genre basically is that you are wasting your time doing it if you're not going to go into drum and bass later. Like, that's weird because the opposite of that, I always thought it was odd when you listen to a drum and bass track and then it goes halftime later. I've always felt that to be a little bit like, it left a bad taste in my ears. And so, but like the other way around is that if you're doing the half step thing, halftime dubstep thing, and then later you go in the drum and bass, it's just kind of like, yes, this is why we're at this speed. That's my own interpretation of that. It's not necessarily the truth of life. But I did, second half is a drum and bass bit, but let's go over the bits. So here's the beginning. Let's look at what we got. So we got this business, which you can't hear. So I would classify this as an ARP. I mean, it is an ARP, but notice how it's actually like a manually written ARP. And this is because sometimes I'll have in my mind an actual vision of how the pattern of the ARP should sound. And then it's usually not something that's easily done with the automated ARP parameters. So, like for example, this one, it did the whole 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 pattern, which you can do with a normal ARP is fine. But the skipping around the progression and then also kind of like just determining which notes are what are a little bit outside of its capabilities. Actually, I just thought of plenty of ways I could have done it, but this is why I do this sort of stuff, and I have an idea of what I'm doing, as opposed to when I usually do the big chord ARPs, where I just kind of like I need lots of notes all over the place that are in this scale, that are in this progression. So here's the progression, here's some notes, and then that's the end of the story. This one was I had a need for a particular ARP progression, and then I had this pad, which is kind of cool. There is a filter in the actual effect slots, but all the movement that we're hearing is coming from the one harmonic. I have two parts active, and I have phasers and filters and LFOs and plucks, the lightness and going on and all that. This is actually a pretty complicated setup, but the result is fairly nice sounding. So that'd be fun to talk about in the sound design portion. And then we get the sort of this bass going on, which starts out being a very solid sub kind of bass, and then after a while, it opens up to being it opens up to live up to its name, squishy bass puck. I apparently missed a K, hit a comma when I named this. So that's automated like a lot with a lot of our stuff. And then we have the lead part. So when I made this track, my first thought was I want to make it melodic. I want to make have something with like a hook, and I want to have like something can remember about what this song sounds like. And so I made. Here's the thing about this though. Like this has sort of worked, but doing stuff like this is a little bit dangerous because this is really fill material, and when you do this in a pattern that's repetitive, that like because this is basically the only pattern that happens throughout the whole track. But if you do something like this and like that happens every single time, every time it's played, then people start to key into that moment and be like, okay, it's repeating itself. And I guess this is more of an issue for like live instrument playing, because if you're doing like you're playing a guitar lick and then you do the same like really cool sort of just riff or something like a fill, like a complicated technical thing, and that happens and it repeats itself over and over again exactly the same way every single time, and people start to key into the that is not my cat. There's a cat in my window. That's not mine. But they start to key into that, and like it's more of a problem for that because that's supposed to be a genre and an application where it's not supposed to be obvious that you're cutting and pasting, even if you are. But I guess it's less of an issue for electronic stuff. But just like that's like I thought that was going to be an issue, especially in the beginning, where like at the beginning is I played that first 2 bits where the fast things happen a lot, and I guess it just like wears on me. And by wears on me, like I get used to it, and so now I start to expect it. This is what's referred to as composer's ear, where you have listened to your own stuff for so long that you almost can't like tolerate the idea of there being anything else happening, which does not necessarily mean that what you did is good. It just means that you think it needs to happen that way. So you're supposed to get someone else to listen to it to kind of be like, this bird, you can do something else, and then you get more ideas or do different things. That's what's supposed to happen. That's obviously not what I did. And then we have this bit. This guy makes an appearance pretty heavily in the track. And also it's Buddy, which is basically the same thing, only a sustained version. Very bell-tony kind of thing. And this sort of is like another melodic element that becomes more prominent in the middle and the end, where the biggest melodic drops happen. Melodic drops. So these guys are stacked on top of each other, and they happen, and they open up, and they're filtered, and all this good stuff. And then there's the rise. There's a lot of stuff in here. So what's this guy? Do I have them labeled? I do. Look at that. Let's see. Number 30. It's probably this guy. Yep. So that's a pretty standard fare harmonic riser for what I do, using the phaser as the source of this primary modulation, and then messing around with a bunch of other stuff. I also have an FM riser, which is number 31, riser 2. And what's this guy? The ringy. See, this is something that's actually from another track of mine. You might recognize that. That's from Tachycardia, the big riser in that track. And then there's this guy. I don't even know what this is. Anticoder. Monastery. Ah, okay. This is the accidental monastery. Interesting. I think that I don't know that I made the monastery. See, the accidental monastery is a patch I came up with one time that accidentally sounded like a choir with lots of reverb. And I think I kept the reverb, but I didn't keep the original patch. I don't know if this is the original patch I used with it. But this is, however, a bass I came up with in anticoder. I can tell because I labeled it as such. So lots of these risers are all together, and lots of modulation and stacking and automation, all this good stuff. And then it's played on top of, you know. So actually, let's talk about what I do with the lead here. So when I do risers, typically what I do, and when there's a progression, is that I have the progression progresses before the riser, but then when the riser hits, it stays at the tonic. What do I mean by tonic? Tonic is basically the bass note of your song. In this case, it's E, or F rather. The key of the song is F, so that means that when this riser hits, all the progression stays in F. So you can see it's very stable, very solid, and it's happening that way. And I actually, like, instead of writing a melody line that made sense in F, I actually just cut up what I had and to make it fit that way for that part. And this guy happens. This guy. Okay, so this is a granulizer that's playing a specific sound. There's lots of effects and stuff on it, and like these effects are all being controlled by this guy. So it has a filter on it, and it's reverb. The reverb goes away after this. This is basically the only part of the song where it's modulated like that. Now there's a lot of that. You can basically see all these stacks of automation clips. Those are all the granulizer moments, and they're basically playing these sounds. These guys, the resampled sounds, are all loaded up into the granulizers, and then these parameters are all being, you know, screwed around with. What we got? We got the stereo separation, the panning, the grain hold time, grain spacing, and wave spacing, and then some of them I have other ones as well, or just wave spacing, grain spacing, and grain hold time. So it's either that or that with the stereo that's involved. And that was a big one of the bigger experiments of this track is using granular synthesis, because I used it pretty heavily in this track, and then also Momentum, the main track off the EP. That was yeah, that was a big one. So that's pretty much that. I do the small fill with the kick and the snare. Yeah. And then the drop happens. So let's look at the drop. The dorp. I'm not gonna talk about the drums. That's gonna be handled in the part number 2. But let's look at the basses. So where's the main bass? I have it labeled main bass. So I actually have a how to bass on this. I've already made one. I couldn't wait when I had finished with the track before the EP was even like finished. I had to talk about it. The short of it is it's a harmonic with that's not it. That might be the hats. That's gonna be fun talking about during the drums. Res bass. So it's basically I have low pass and I have a resonance engaged, and I'm modulating the width of the resonance on top of everything. It's being distorted a lot. And it's a lot of fun. That's that guy. Then we have bass 2, which is just the juiciest, weirdest sounding thing. And this guy is being vocodexed, guitar rigged, and then compressed. It's being guitar rigged a little bit, like the wet dry is being applied to it. I had heard that using guitar processing on basses could be cool sometimes, and I've seen people use it to great effect. However, it's not my bag. And we have bass 3. It's almost as if it's chronological. This is a pretty standard Reese kind of thing. Like, creating this is not super difficult. I'll cover that in the sound design portion. It's called level 8.1 for a reason that I'm not going to talk about. And then we have the other Reese. That one I classify. That's why it was a Reese. It's a Reese. This guy's a more more Reese Reese. That's labeled Reese 1. It's like the first Reese I ever saved as a preset for my basses. And more main bass. And then the first instance of the granular bass coming back into the main drop. This sound, what does that sound? That's one of the Reeses again. I have like all these effects not engaged on that Reese. It's funny. So these are resampled basses. A lot of them going on, and these I forget which one they started out as, but then the usual record them. We can't hear it because and those end up being these guys. There it is. And then they're chorused and compressed and EQ'd, and then that's the sound that I'm using in the track. And also the ones that are being granulized. And these guys. Those are pretty much all the sounds that are being used in the drop. It's 5 or 6 of them. And then we come to the break, where we kind of go to our own little melodic drop, and then there's a rise, and then the second drop happens. But let's talk about what's happening in the break, because I do add some new things. First thing I do is I add in a stack of the lead. I'm reinforcing it. I believe I opened this up, or maybe not. Is it this guy? That must be this dude. Yeah, so I gave it the typical supersaw lead treatment where it starts out closed and then opens up and it gets all big and flowery kind of deal. On top of the regular lead that I already have here, but then I also stack in a new bass. This is essentially a square version of the original squelchy pluck bass. This is the squelchy pluck bass. And this is like the same patch, only set to square a little bit. Plus some additional like chorusing and distortion and a little bit of phaser and whatever. But like that's, you just make it more diffuse or whatever. It's even being run through the same effects slot. Like it's just the same patch, but a new layer. So now I start using that little belly thing as a lead element, and then I thought that was cool, so I stacked in an actual lead, which is essentially again the same patch, only with less low pass to cut off all the harmonics, and so there's more harmonics to get sharper, like when you heard it just then. That was a cool melody introduction there. And then we're doing the rise again. This is the same rising section, with the biggest difference being this lead isn't here, which means that the progression is actually progressing as opposed to staying the E. But it goes back to E when E happens. Also, the lead's not present because we're using this new lead instead of the regular track's main lead. Now this part transitions into drum and bass. So the big part that makes this the drum and bass feel is actually this sample right here, which we can't hear because it's probably being affected. Yeah. You might be thinking, oh, it's being high pass and it's gonna come down. It doesn't come back down. I think maybe it does come back down. No, it doesn't come back down. It blends in just the right kind of blendy way to make it fit better the way it does. And it gives us this sort of old school sampled feel, which is why I did use that. I also used it in the rise right here. It's kind of hard to see. I'm recording. And, all right. And then this kind of fades in over here. And then we start to hear the very end of it right here. And now suddenly we're starting to feel like, oh, it's going double time all of a sudden. And then drum and bass happens. This section was funny because when I first made this song, my plan was I was going to take the first drop and basically double time it and make some variations. However, this drop double time does not work. It does. I mean, it'll work. It's just dumb. It's not as good as it could be. So I actually had to make a new drop, like a new rhythm, a new distribution of the sounds to make it actually make sense with the drum and bass feel. And I also had to make new drums. I actually made a whole new set of drums for just this second part here. Particularly enjoy what the granular synthesis is doing in this part. Like that kind of like separated sort of sound is what happens when we have which one is it? So we have a relatively high grade spacing, but then the grade whole time increases, which basically is increasing the size of each individual grain, which gives it more time to each be a thing. And then as a stereo, what the stereo separation does is it alternates stereo between each individual grain. So if you have really slow grains, suddenly it's very obviously left and right. It sounds very like Star Wars-y, you know what I mean? Like Star Wars vehicle sounds. This is what that sounds like. That's what that reminds me of. And I enjoy it. Now these are mostly still the same sounds I've been using the whole track. It helps that the primary arsenal of the sounds I'm using is full of greasy goodness, which fits very well with the genre of drum and bass. It's almost as if that was planned. And then we basically have the melodic drop again, only now we're double timing it. So I had the extra, like the extra leady part on top of everything, but I didn't have the original leady part, just the top part. And then I also had the bell lead doing its thing. So that's kind of why I didn't do that, because I didn't want the original lead to interfere too much with the new lead. I needed to have it layered, but not so clustered that it was bad. I kept the new bass, the square bass on top of the other bass. And I did not have the ARP active for the first half of this, but then the ARP came in the second part, and then it faded in a bit. And while everything else faded out, low passing, the main drum pattern stopped, so all the side chaining stopped, and everything else got faded out. And then we had the very bottom, and then we see a whole lot of other fades out. And this was a little bit weird because like getting this to end properly was a bit difficult for me. Like that's a very not resolute ending, but I honestly couldn't make it any better than that. Like I couldn't just put a note at the end of this. Like I tried to like just open it up and put like a note at the bottom there, and that kind of threw it off. And like if any of the other sounds actually ended, like I could have maybe brought the chords out a bit more, but like I don't know, this was weird. But I honestly don't particularly care too much about the endings most of the time. Like intros are super important because of the first impression you get of a song, but after you flog people through most of the drops, most people don't even listen to the ends of the songs. So like if I have to take one for the team, it's gonna be the outro takes that one for the team, like that kind of thing. If I can't just figure something out, like for Codename Hurricane, the piano ending was like dope, and that was a plan. I'm like, damn, I'm gonna have a nice solo piano outro. It's gonna be sweet. And then for certain other tracks, it worked out better. And then like for the end of the glitch hop track that I made from scratch on my live stream, I knew that the ending was actually going to be very abrupt. Like I had that planned out. So if I have a plan, I'll use it. But if I don't have a plan, I don't really, sweat it too much. I just do something, contrived like this fadey out business. And that works. So that's pretty much every individual thing that happens in this track. Part number 2, we'll talk about how I put it all together to make it work. And we'll discuss this monstrosity that I have in the master. Yeah. All those jokes you have about compressing it 9 times, this is a 10-band, multi-band compressor that I built in Patcher after a compressor, which goes then into another compressor. And so this was the big experiment for mastering. So that'll be a good discussion. If you have any questions about any of this, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day. Goodbye.